let's continue now with the speech. We're around 30 hours away from tomorrow's scheduled budget speech by the Finance Minister. Still difficult, though, to know what exactly is going to happen. Some reports that the DA has not agreed on changes to the budget, but that ANC cabinet ministers have. But frankly, we don't really know. Last month, the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, had to abandon his speech before it started because the DA said in a cabinet meeting 2 hours before it was due to begin it wouldn't support a VAT increase. Dr. Azar Jammine is the head economist at Econometrix. Dr. Jammine, good morning to you. There is a part of me, and I hate to have to say this, there's a part of me that is not sure we will have a budget speech tomorrow. In a worst-case scenario, if the speech doesn't happen, what message would that send about the way our government and our economy is being managed by our politicians?
Again, as was the case on the 19th of February, Stephen, it will send a message that there is no overriding government who has overriding power in the country, and that whoever is in government has to abide by certain concessions to one another for government to actually be functional. I don't believe that it will be a catastrophe yet again. This kind of situation has prevailed on many occasions in many countries where there are coalition governments and where no single party actually controls the government. We are in a very nascent early stage of learning how to deal with such situations. So to that extent, I think it'll be possible to forgive us. The more important notion about this is that this standoff is all around the concept of fiscal austerity and the different concepts of how this can be imposed. And to that extent, that will sustain, I think, quite a lot of confidence in the ability to continue with financing the fiscus going forward. It's not a case of a party wanting to be completely reckless and that being turned down. It's more all about how do we fund this fiscal austerity program that is currently underway.
It's important that you say that, and I'm glad you did, because really in the public domain, I think we've become fixated on a debate around VAT and whether there should be a 2 percentage point VAT increase. You're talking about the philosophy that underpins that, which is really about, do we need more money? If we do, where it comes from, or should we cut expenditure?
That is absolutely correct. And the third alternative would have been simply to just increase the budget deficit and the public debt. And at no stage is any of the political parties actually doing that, saying that. And I think that is probably the most encouraging feature of this. It's a debate about whether to cut spending or whether to increase taxes, not about whether to borrow still more.
That's really important. Are there other ways we could get more revenue into the fiscus? When we focus on VAT, have we become fixated on the wrong thing?
The reason why we've focused on VAT is it's the easiest way in the short term to get additional money, and it's one of the most certain forms of tax. There are alternatives, and I think it may materialize tomorrow, and that is that in the first attempted budget speech, it was clear that the government was bent on providing some relief to personal taxpayers in the form of increasing the thresholds at which different tax rates would be paid in such a way as to protect them against the ravages of what is known as bracket creep, whereby people get salary increases that push them up the tax ladder and they end up effectively paying more tax. The government may decide that rather than do that, just not move the tax thresholds at all. And what will then be implied is that individual taxpayers will be paying effectively more tax than they were before, but they may not notice it because the actual tax rates won't have, the thresholds won't have actually shifted.
I mean, the other big debate is around cutting back on what government spends. And I mean, I'm always interested in this because everyone will immediately think of we need more money for nurses, for doctors, for teachers. Of course, I'm not entirely convinced that we need more money for people who run driver's license centres in Gauteng, because we know, and the Transport MEC at the time has said this, we know that they take money that they're corrupt and then they still demand an increase. I mean, is there space for government to cut back on what it spends?
You're absolutely correct, and that is where one could see this whole standoff as being quite positive from a longer-term point of view, because it is really and truly focusing the attention of our politicians on the possibility of actually incurring significant savings in our expenditure patterns without having to raise taxes any further. And as you say, it's by focusing on where is the money being spent effectively. Obviously, if teachers and nurses and doctors are doing their work, you don't want to cut back on that, especially when there is a shortage. But you do want to cut back on where there are bureaucratic processes in excess, where it would be quite possible with a more efficient structure to actually run affairs as effectively as they are being done at the moment, if not more effectively, with fewer people.
There's so much that's likely to happen over the next little while. And I do just worry that what we might start to see is that in coalition governments, we'll actually start to see a lot of negotiation that's not really about spending money in the best way. It's really about people looking after their constituencies. Is that something we need to look for in budgets to come? I mean, I hate to say it, but budgets could start to look like council budgets in some ways, where people aren't really looking for the best way to do things.
Unfortunately, that is the nature of democracy, as we find, and you've got good democracies and bad democracies, and what you're suggesting is indeed a possibility, but I don't know that that's any worse than the kind of situation where the government has become complacent and has been in place for 30 years and just carries on regardless, not worrying about how it's spending the money, and then just looks around for where it's going to get the money to fund it. So, even what you suggest might in due course turn out to be more effective than having a majority government on its own that is overly complacent.